All right, folks, we've been talking about it now for about a month, and it's here. Our mini series on the power of play kicks off today. You are going to be in this mini series all summer long. We have incredible lineup of guests talking about the power of play with children and the power of play with ourselves as adults. Trisha, today we kick off this mini series with Allie. Can you talk a little bit more about our guest today?
Yes, absolutely. So we have with us Allie Ticktin, who is the founder of Play to Progress. Allie's mission is to empower children and their families through sensory play so that they can thrive through childhood and beyond. Allie's also the author of a book. We talk about it briefly in this episode, Play to Progress, where she's going to be providing parents with an overview of all eight senses. That might be surprising to you. That's going to help parents have ways to enhance those senses at home. Allie uses the science of child development and the joy of play to boost children's confidence and enhance development within all areas of their life, from social and emotional to physical and academic. You're going to be able to learn all about Allie and Play to Progress by heading over to the show notes. And if you're thinking sensory integration thing sounds interesting, you're in for a treat because Allie sets us up with some practical ways that we can build that into our classroom and be thinking about it, I think, in our daily lives this summer too. Jeff, was there anything from this conversation that you're thinking, I want to signpost this, listeners, listen for this moment. This is something that's going to stick with you.
I think the moment that got me in the episode was just when she starts talking about good learning looks like play. And that just took me back to being a classroom teacher in those moments that you have as a teacher, when you look around your classroom and it's noisy and chaotic and kids are having fun and there's scraps of paper everywhere on the floor at the end of the day. And you can just say to yourself, oh my gosh, that was a great day of learning. And I think just this idea that good learning looks like play. It's having fun. It's being hands-on. It's being happy and excited about the work that you're doing. I also think she touches on in the podcast, and we're going to do this throughout the miniseries, because I think it's really good for us as adults to reflect on what does that look like for us in our lives, and how do we know that play is good for kids, and we know that we have to have unstructured time in our lives. And what Allie touches on today around this sensory thing, I think about myself, where even there are times as an adult, and Trisha, I'd like you to reflect on this too after this episode, but I find, and I hadn't even thought about this until today's episode, but I get into these moments where I just have to go build something. And for me, I get out the saw and I start cutting wood and I build things and screw things together. But I think back to my childhood, I had a million Legos growing up. Probably not a million, but it seemed my parents bought me Legos, and it's what I buy all my nieces and nephews. As soon as they're old enough, all they get from me is Legos. But for me, that was it. It was building things. It was this putting structures together, taking it apart, re-putting it together, feeling the pieces in my hand. And even now, like putting wood together or building things, which is why we work on rental properties. And I love doing that work. And for me, I think there is a part of it that it is a sensory piece, that it's calming to me. It's not work. I actually enjoy doing that. Is there something like that as you reflect on this episode that you find for you?
I take great effort in making coffee in such an intentional way. And it's not just the taste, it's the smell. It's even like the sound of grinding the beans.
Okay.
And yeah, like that's Allie in this episode had me thinking about the power of sensory experience as a way to really tap into what do we need and how does that help us regulate and reset, but also how that is such a great part of being human.
Yeah.
Our conversation really excited me to check out Allie's book. The title to that is Play to Progress, Lead Your Child to Success Using the Power of Sensory Play. We're going to link to it over there in the show notes, but maybe this episode is a great one to start our summer series with, because the summer is a wonderful time to really be thinking about sensory experiences. And now I feel like I'm going to be watching out for them in those small ways, like you
Yeah.
talked about. I'm guessing, Jeff, when you're doing woodworking, it's also like the smell of the sawdust.
Yeah, or even the feel of it on my skin,
Yeah,
which I hate, but at the same time, I know I accomplished something because I've got
right.
the feel of the sawdust on my skin. And I don't know, it's so great. Such a great episode that just, I hope, makes others reflect as well. Reflect about your classroom, but reflect about, just to your point, the human spirit in all of us and what does it mean to be human and have these sensories that we get to lean into. Before we get to today's episode with Allie, here's a quick word from today's show sponsor.
Discover the power of acknowledgement with Libra. In a world where every staff member's dedication shapes the future, recognizing their efforts becomes our mission. Libra transforms your school into a place where achievements, big and small, are celebrated daily, creating a ripple effect of motivation and pride. Join the recognition revolution with Libra, where every achievement is a cause for celebration. For more information and a free demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com today.
Librarians, meet MacEnvision, the future of library management. With a student-centered design, MacEnvision's intuitive interface and seamless navigation ensures that your students find the information they need quickly and effortlessly. Discover how MacEnvision can transform your school at macen.com/MacEnvision. All right. And with that, here is Allie, the founder of Play to Progress, talking about sensory play, the importance of it in our classrooms. Such a great episode. And with that, on with the show.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. We are really excited all summer long to be talking about the power of play. And we are speaking with somebody who knows all about the power of play. I think it might be fair, Allie, to say like you've made a career based on play being powerful. Feel free to push back against that. But we're really happy to be sharing your expertise in this episode and digging into your thoughts on play. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I definitely would not push against that. I actually embrace that wholeheartedly.
That's so great. That's so great. Let's get started here. Our first question is, what is one myth about play that you seek to correct through the work that you do with Play to Progress?
Absolutely. So I'm going to dive just straight into sensory play because that's what I specialize in. And I think the biggest myth when it comes to sensory play, when I ask whether educators or parents, what does sensory play look like? The first thing that kind of pops into their head is tactile play. So they'll say things like messy play, sensory bins, the perfect Pinterest sensory bin comes to mind that feels very stressful at times to put together. They'll sometimes talk about noise, but rarely do I hear the true 8 senses being talked about. So we have 8 senses, not 5, and I can talk about these for hours and hours. But what sensory play truly is, it's any play that engages any of these senses. So that includes movement. That includes climbing, jumping, now cooking, right? That's a big one. Think of how a child's senses are engaged in the kitchen. And so a parent may not think it's play to have my child join me in the kitchen, but it is. And there's so much a child can take from that. Even little things like laundry, like that pulling out the wet clothes, carrying the heavy clothes and putting them into the dryer, that's great proprioceptive input. That's also engaging the senses and can be thought of and made into play in so many ways. The other big thing that comes to my mind is play is fun. Now, it's 1000% true that play is fun, but play is also work, right? Play is where the magic happens for our kiddos. And I think there's so many expectations, and sometimes we'll see kiddos playing and think, oh, they need to be more productive. But really, the productivity happens in the play.
I love that. And I also love that you just gave parents like every chore can be, every home chore can be considered play. As we're headed into summer, that's a really good one. Just, hey, you're not doing the laundry, you're playing with your sensories. This is great. I love
You're
this.
engaging your sensory system. No, it is so true that so many daily tasks engage a child's sensory system. And the truth is, kids like to feel powerful. They like to feel needed. They want that responsibility, right? And I think sometimes as adults, we have to let them have it because is it quicker sometimes to do it yourself? 1,000%. Sometimes you have to redo it when they do it? 100%.
Allie, there's so many studies out there about play being good for us on so many different levels. Like the research seems to be pretty just conclusive on the benefits that are out there when we take advantage of play and when we engage in it in thoughtful ways, like you're talking about. What might you want to see more of when it comes to making play more accessible?
This is a really good question. And the very first thing that pops into mind is something I've been dealing with really on a daily basis pretty frequently right now, which is as our kiddos go up in grade, so second, third grade, and the academic pressures get bigger, we're seeing less and less playtime. And I've actually spoken to some parents of kiddos who come to me and I said, this is not enough recess time. And we need to advocate for more open playtime, more recess in school. And if you look, as a child goes up in grade, sometimes it's 2 15-minute recesses, right? And I think we think of recess as fun, but we need to start restructuring that in our brain as recess is mandatory. Recess should never be taken away, ever. I am so firmly against it. And we're still seeing it. We see it maybe less now, but we do still see, oh, you didn't finish your math. You're going to stay in for 5 minutes of reset. But that play is nourishing a child's brain. That is nourishing a child's body. That is giving them the sensory input that they need. So we're actually having a negative impact on their academics. And so that is something that I think of frequently. And I think of our middle school kids. So what happens in middle school? No more recess, right?
Yeah.
They lose recess, but their body still needs that sensory input. Now they're not getting it. And so that to me is a huge shift that I would like to see really nationwide is let's start understanding just how serious recess is and stop seeing it as just fun. But
Where did this focus? And maybe you don't know this answer because I think back, and you're absolutely right. There's two things. One, I think back when I was in elementary school, we had, like, I can remember a 15-minute morning recess, a 30-minute lunchtime recess, and then a 15-minute afternoon recess. So we had an hour of unstructured playtime where we were outside running around, kicking balls, whatever, right? Here in the state of Washington, they just passed a bill that it is required that every student in elementary school get a minimum of 30 minutes of daily recess. How do we get to a point in education where we have to pass a state law saying that kids need unstructured time in their lives? How did we get here?
I don't know. And you know what? My first thought when you said that is 30 minutes. That's nothing.
I know. It's nothing.
Like, what do you mean? By the time they get their rain boots on and get outside and transition, we've just eaten up half of that. That is certainly not enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know that answer, but I feel very strongly of where we need to go, and we need to be taking recess much more seriously and taking playtime more seriously. We need to let kids have the space to move their body, to get sensory input, and also to explore their imagination, their creativity, right? Something I always think about is kids no longer really know how to play.
Yeah.
And part of that is screens,
So
tech.
true.
There's so many pieces to that.
Yeah.
But there's also a piece of if their day is so structured, because often then they come home to homework, they come home to soccer practice, which is structured, the basketball practice, whatever it is that they have. But what happened to just you come home and you go outside with a bunch of neighborhood friends and you create?
Yeah.
Because that's the world I grew up in.
Yeah.
And we were always creating things, whether it was like a homework hut, or I grew up very much in the Midwest, or like catching toads, which I was always like, I'm not touching the toads, but would
Yeah.
watch others catch, or every little piece. Like we used to, in the winter, take our sleds. We all lived on hills and go snowboarding, standing up our sleds, creating things. Kids now, if you say, go make a fort, what do they say? They say, go buy me the fort maker on Amazon.
Yeah. Or I don't know how. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So true.
Part of that, though, I do think I'm going to bet money, and listeners reach out, tell me that you disagree with me, but I think listeners of this show would fully agree with everything that you just said and would say educators are some of the strongest advocates for play, but there's a parent caretaker education piece where if I'm a teacher and I've got some play-based learning happening, often I've got to defend it to parents and caretakers who will ask the offhanded question about where's the learning?
Yeah. Or why aren't we doing math? Our math scores are
Right.
low.
I'm wondering if you've got some suggestions for ways to help educate parents and caretakers who maybe have a misguided notion of either the importance of free play or play-based learning, just even the reality that so much learning happens through play. Do you have some thoughts on bringing that part of the
Absolutely.
community in to understand better?
I actually think this is a big education piece, and it's so much what I do because interesting, our therapy, what does it look like? It looks a lot like play. And even before therapy starts, we have discussions with parents that says, and very upfront, good therapy looks like play. Now, when I'm in a therapy session and a parent is in the room and we're playing, I narrate. And oh, yeah, these boulders that we're pretending we're moving to the pond. Did you notice X, Y, and Z? These are providing proprioceptive input. Did you notice their body? And I find that narration actually really helps it click for the parents, right? And so it's almost that education piece. So having the educators break down, here's what I see. Here's what I see your children getting. Instead of just using the words, play is great for them, that's where they learn, actually bring it to their child and say, did you notice? And give specific examples, X, Y, and Z. Here's what I see. Breaking it down, I think is extremely important to help them understand and connecting it back to what they are learning.
Oh, I like that. I feel like when I watch a sport that I don't know a lot about, like the announcer really helps me understand like what's happening on that court or that space.
Thank you for tuning in to Shifting Schools. Let's pause our discussion to spotlight Libra HQ, a breakthrough in using AI to deepen connections within organizations. Imagine an environment where every staff member feels truly seen and valued. This is the heart of Libra's mission. Libra transforms how leaders celebrate and recognize the personal and professional milestones of their team members. It's not just about reminders. Libra's AI dives deeper, offering insight into enhanced team cohesion and promote a culture where support and acknowledgement are paramount. Picture a school where every individual is acknowledged, from work achievements to personal victories, creating a culture of appreciation in just minutes a day. In these challenging times, where the demands on educators have never been higher, Libra offers a way for school leaders to lead with true empathy and compassion, ensuring every team member feels an integral part of their community's success. Discover how Libra can revolutionize your school's culture. For a demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com. Let's build a future where every educator and staff member feels connected and valued. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
Allie, it's not necessarily just about recess, the importance of recess. I'm right there with you. There are also things that we can do within our classrooms and spaces to make sure that that mindset is infused Would you talk to us about what a sensory inclusive classroom looks, or maybe give us an example of what you'd be looking for in order to consider a classroom as being sensory inclusive?
Absolutely. So this is a big thing that I care a lot about, which is creating more sensory inclusive classrooms. I find that educators really want to do this.
Mm.
They're extremely motivated to do this, and it's just the how. And so, what I look at in a classroom is one, we want to think of all different things. We want to think of what is the visual input like? What is the sound levels like? Because some kiddos may be more sensitive to sound. Some kiddos may be overstimulated by too much visual input. So, when I walk into a classroom, those are two of the first things I'll notice is one, sometimes I call it the Pinterest classroom, where you have all the posters like you can read, which is
Yeah.
of course like all of us millennials grew up with that poster in our classroom. And occasionally that will still be there, but some of that stuff can be very visually overstimulating,
Mm.
right? I also look for a cozy corner in every classroom. And this actually, even our middle schoolers, everyone really benefits from these cozy corners. And what is a cozy corner? It's a spot where a child can go to regulate, right?
Mm.
Just one child. Often I'll go into a classroom, parent or educators will be like, here is our reading nook, but I see a spot for 4 or 5 kids. And it's very open. We want a nice enclosed spot where a child can go and regulate. It is never a punishment. It is very much they go there on their own. Body tools. What are body tools? You probably know them as fidgets. We call them body tools because I find that to be a much more inclusive term. It's not a fidget, it's not a toy, it's saying what it is. And so I'll give you an example. For me, as a child in 2nd or 3rd grade, like during COVID, we were going through all my old elementary stuff. I said I needed to improve because I was too fidgety. But what if that was transformed to your body needs to move a little bit more? Here, use these body tools. So that's what I want to look for in a classroom is how are we responding to our kids' sensory needs and including them within. I would love for every classroom to have an open discussion about everybody's body needs something different. So you might see Joey on a hug-about chair, and you might see Johnny on sitting up, and Alexis is sitting crisscross applesauce on the carpet. Everyone's sitting different, but everyone is sitting for their body's needs, right? One friend might have a body tool. Another friend may not need one. And it's not she gets one, I don't, but it's more of an open discussion about everybody's body needs something different. So if a child's body needs a body break and they go into the cozy corner, that's because their body needs that right now. That's not necessarily a special place. It's just that all of our bodies need something different. And we're acknowledging that and bringing in those modifications that are available to everybody, not just the kids with an IEP or the kids who are identified as here's the accommodation that we're making, but it's actually for everybody while being really mindful of the environment because the environment is extremely important.
Allie, can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because I'm almost wondering if there are some other industries that have got this in ways that schools need to catch up to. And I say that because as I hear you talk about the valuing of our senses, as a dog parent, I'm thinking the pet stores have got this down. Like the different toys I have for my dog that is a delight for all of her senses, they are just draining my bank account right now. They do a really good job, I think, of explaining how like this is going to be really calming for the animal. And again, like all of the messaging there around like the play, the energy, that I feel like that's an industry where like the marketing is on, it is working. I've spent a lot of money on dog stuff. Is there another example that you can think of where sensory inclusion is being done really well that maybe education or school can look to for some motivation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I, of course, think of the therapy world, but that's our world and it's what we do. So
Sure.
maybe not a fair comparison. But one thing that popped in my mind, and I don't know why this popped in my mind, was the art world,
Mm.
which is a funny thing. But I think what I was thinking is in the art world, there's so much ability to be who you are that it's natural that we will have people really expressing themselves as they need, which
Mm.
allows people to bring in what they need. We don't see that quite as much in academics. And like I said, I really believe that educators want to build classrooms like this. I train a lot of different teachers and in different schools, and I will end up with a line like way down, and I can't get out of there with teachers and teachers asking me questions. They really want this knowledge. And it's just getting them that and getting them the resources in their classrooms.
Mm.
And so getting school administrators on board with how important this is to invest in this. And it's not a big investment. And often parents, because some of the stuff, it's very, you can do it with what you have. And parents will often say, I'll donate those pillows or whatever it is. And so just choosing to lean into it and make those accommodations.
Mm. It's so funny. I remember when we moved back to the States, I substituted for a while back here at in Seattle public schools. And I'll never forget, I was subbing in this 5th grade classroom, and there was a boy in the class and just could not sit still. This kid had so much energy, and you could tell he just needed to move. And I can only imagine, if I was lucky enough, I was a substitute for just one day. But if you were his everyday teacher, putting up with this energy level every day would be wearing on you if you didn't have strategies to know that this particular child needs a lot of movement. And so even as a sub, I had him up. I was like, you need to go stand over there, do your work standing up, because sitting in a desk isn't working for you. Like, the kid needed a standing desk so his body could move. And even after, again, hardly any recess, this is before this law passed here in the state of Washington, there hardly any recess. And about, 1:00 in the afternoon, the kid was again just off the walls. And I was lucky enough that I was substituting in a portable that was literally right next to the track. So I just opened the door and I said, you need to go run 2 laps. And he thought it was the coolest thing ever that he got to go out and run 2 laps. But after running 2 laps, he was literally exhausted and he focused for the last hour and a half of class. I'm like, this kid just has energy that's got to get out somehow. And to your point, like, everybody needs something different. And this kid, I'm just like, you could almost, he didn't have the words to say it, but you could just tell, like, this kid's confined in this classroom and just needed movement in his life and just didn't have the know-how to know that's what he needed. And I can just see teachers frustrated with a kid that's just like, this kid never sits still. Yeah, this kid needs to move. You can just see it in him.
And my big question is, so what's going on in his body and his sensory system? And our big thing too with kids is, how do we help them understand what their body
That's
needs?
right. Yeah.
Because what I also want to prevent, both from the teacher side and the kid side, is that feeling of, oh, I'm the bad kid. And so if we shift the language to, I notice your body needs X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Or I'm wondering if your body needs, because I don't ever want to put something on a child and also have the child recognize what their body needs. We were working on this with a child. I went into the school and did a school visit, and the child had a body tool, which, yes, was a fidget. And we transitioned to the music room, and the music teacher was not filled in on what we'd talked about with the main teachers of what we were doing and different things like that. And the music teacher said to the child, who was only in 1st grade, said, you need to put the toy away. And I was so proud of this child, because he said, no, this is my body tool. It's going to help me listen. And he got that language and knew to self-advocate, right? But it's also shifting it from the educator standpoint of helping them understand what a child needs. And I've always said that there should be a sensory class in education schools, like in schools of education, because it is so prevalent.
Yeah.
And I notice whenever I'm leading trainings, teachers just eat it up. Educators want this information and they just don't have it, but it's important that it's incorporated.
Yeah. Mackin Educational Resources has once again partnered with us for our summer mini-series. Thank you to Mackin for continuing to be a partner of the Shifting Schools community. Their new product, Mackin Vision, is the future of library management. Created with your students' need at the forefront, Mackin Vision offers a user-friendly interface that simplifies navigation, making it easy for students to find what they need. This state-of-the-art system includes features like intuitive browsing, secure multi-level access, multimedia searching, and whole school rostering. Additionally, it has a teacher library portal, aggregated dashboard, live analytics, and centralized reporting. Mackin Vision is designed to streamline your school's library operations. Learn more about how Mackin Vision can benefit your school at mackin.com/MackinVision. Schedule your free demonstration and experience the future today. That's a great segue into our next question. For any listeners out there who might be interested in pursuing sensory integration or specializing in sensory integration, what are some steps that educators could take now, thinking that this is over the summertime? What are some things that teachers might be able to do in their own professional learning over this summer to maybe up their own skill level around this idea of sensory integration?
Yeah. So first I'll go for any OTs listening, if you want to be trained in sensory integration, I think that is such an important thing. We need a lot of pediatric OTs who are well trained in it, and there's many different certification programs. Now, in terms of teachers, if teachers want to learn more about sensory and better their knowledge, books. There's so many great books. I wrote a book on sensory that I hope is helpful. And there are many different books out there. And I think it's a really good way to truly understand the sensory system. And of course, asking your administrators, bring these trainings to us, things like that. But I think books are an easy way to start. And if you don't know of the app Libby, I highly recommend it. And it is a free online library that you use your library card. It comes right to your Kindle and it's completely free. So you can rent these books straight to your Kindle or your phone or whatever e-reader you're using and have them for free, which is really nice. And so that's what I highly recommend is start reading on the sensory system.
Time to do it this summer.
Yeah, we'll be sure to link to your book in the show notes. Allie, we are asking of each and every one of our guests on this special mini-series on the power of play to leave us with a piece of advice for our listeners and for Jeff and I as well. Anybody who's looking to just better embed play in our day-to-day lives, to not have to make sure that we've got a whole day just to schedule it in, but just to sprinkle it in throughout the week. What's one piece of advice you have for folks who just want to make sure we've got a little bit of a micro dose of play?
Other than laundry.
But real play. No, I think this is a good question. And even one that I have to remember. My whole life is play, but I still have to remember to take time out of therapeutic play that I'm doing with kiddos and find time for personal play, whether that's going to the gym, going to the beach. And I'll tell you what I think of is think of it just as important as eating, right? If we prioritize it like work, food, all of these things, and sometimes schedule it in, right? So we often, as adults, we have these very scheduled lives. Put it on your schedule. I'm going to play now. Pick up a new hobby. And then one other thing I'll say is if you are a parent and you're at home and spending time with your kiddos, get on the floor with them and let yourself go there. Get your inner camp counselor out, get silly, get funny. And I promise not only will it be so therapeutic for you, but it's going to be great for your guys' relationship while you realize you go to bed that night and you're like, that felt great on my body,
I
right?
love that.
And so get on the floor, get moving. And I always use the term, let your inner camp counselor come out. And that's probably from my time spent as a camp counselor and how you really see everyone get out and be silly and different things and let that person come out. Don't be afraid to, don't always hold your inner camp counselor in.
I like that. It's like rebrand silly, right? Like silly can have a negative connotation when it should have such a positive one because, as you said, it's a great way to bond with family and friends. So thank you so much, Allie, founder of Play to Progress. You're going to learn all about her organization by heading over to the show notes. A joy to talk with you about the power of play today.
Thank you for having me.